Hello friends, this is the second part of the explanation of the chapter Nelson Mandela, A Long Walk to Freedom. In life, every man has twin obligations to his family, to his parents, to his wife and children, and he has an obligation to his people, his community, his country. Mandela says that in life, every man has twin obligations. Twin means two. The first duty or first obligation of every man is towards his family, for his parents, for his wife and for his children. And the second duty, second obligation is towards his people, his community and his country. That means towards the society and his country. So these are the two obligations that every man has. In a civil and human society, each man is able to fulfill those obligations according to his own inclinations and abilities. Inclinations means natural tendencies of behavior. A person behave according to his natural tendency or natural behavior. Mandela says that in a society which is civil or a society which is human, which is based on human feelings and human thoughts, in those kind of societies, every man is able to fulfill these two obligations, these two duties according to his inclination or behavior or ability. But in a country like South Africa, it was almost impossible for a man of my birth and color to fulfill both of those obligations. But he says that in a country like South Africa, where it was a crime to be born as a Negro or to be born as a black-skinned man, it was impossible for a man like Nelson Mandela to perform their duty, to fulfill both of those obligations. In South Africa, a man of color who attempted to live as a human being was punished and isolated. He says that any person, any black person, any colored person who tried to live like a human being, he was punished or he was isolated by the white-skinned people. He says that black-skinned people had no rights to perform those obligations, to perform those duty towards their family and towards their country. In South Africa, a man who tried to fulfill his duty to his people was inevitably ripped from his family and his home and was forced to live a life apart. Inevitably means unavoidably. He says that any colored person in South Africa who tried to live as a human being, he was punished and isolated. And in South Africa, a man who tried to fulfill his duty, he was inevitably or unavoidably ripped from his family, taken away from his family and his home, and most probably would have been put in the prison and was forced to live a life apart, a twilight existence of secrecy and rebellion. And that man was forced to live apart from his family and house. He had to live a twilight existence. Twilight means a two kind of life. Twi means two. That means that person has to live two kind of life. That person has to live his life secretly as a rebellion. Rebellion means a person who rebel against the government, who take part in the struggle against the government. I did not in the beginning choose to place my people above my family, but in attempting to serve my people, I found that I was prevented from fulfilling my obligations as a son, a brother, a father, and a husband. Mandela says that in the beginning, when he became freedom fighter, he did not choose to place his people, the people of his country, above his family. But in attempting to serve his people, while he was trying to serve the people in his society, to serve the people of South Africa, he found that he was prevented from fulfilling his obligations as a son, as a brother, as a father and a husband. He had to distance himself from his family and his children so that his children and his family could not suffer because of him. I was not born with a hunger to be free. I was born free, free in every way that I could know. Mandela says that he was not born with a hunger to be free, because when he was born, when he was young, when he was a child, he believed that he was free in every other way. He believed that he could do anything that he wanted to do. Free to run in the fields near my mother's hut, free to swim in the clear stream that ran through my village, free to roast mealies under the stars and ride the broad backs of slow-moving bulls. All these activities which Mandela used to do in his childhood, he was free to do any of these activities freely, without any obstacles, without any prevention. So he thought that he was born free. Mealies means corn. Roast corn under the stars. That means during the night he used to roast corn, and he used to also ride the broad backs of slow-moving bulls as a child. So he was free to do anything, whatever he liked, whatever he wanted to do. So he thought that he was born free. As long as I obeyed my father and abided by the customs of my tribe, I was not troubled by the laws of man or God. As long during his childhood, as long as Mandela obeyed his father, as long as he obeyed the customs of his tribe, he was free to do anything. So he thought that he was born free. It was only when I began to learn that my boyhood freedom was an illusion. Illusion means something that appears to be real, but it is not. He began to aware of this thing, that his boyhood freedom, his childhood freedom was just an illusion. He was not free. He was living in a country which was ruled by the white-skinned people of Europe. And when I discovered as a young man that my freedom had already been taken from me, I began to hunger for it. He discovered that his freedom was already taken from him, and that's why he began to hunger for the freedom. He wanted freedom for himself. He wanted to become free. At first, as a student, I wanted freedom only for myself. The transitory freedom of being able to stay out at night, read what I pleased, and go where I chose. Transitory means not permanent. That means that kind of freedoms which are not permanent, which are temporary. So when Mandela was a student, he only wanted transitory freedoms. That means freedoms which are not permanent. Freedoms like he wanted to stay out at night. He wanted to roam. He wanted freedom where he could go anywhere where he wanted to go. He wanted only these transitory freedoms when he was a young student. Later, as a young man in Johannesburg, Johannesburg is the name of the city of South Africa. Later on, as a young man in Johannesburg, I yearned for the basic and honorable freedoms of achieving my potential, of earning my keep, of marrying and having a family, the freedom not to be obstructed in a lawful life. Later, when he became a young man and when he was living in Johannesburg, he wanted more freedoms for himself. He wanted to achieve his potential. He wanted to do whatever he wanted to do. He wanted to earn his keep. Earn his keep means he wanted to earn his livelihood. He wanted to do a job for himself. He wanted to earn his livelihood for him and his family. Of marrying and having a family. He wanted to start a family of his own. He wanted to marry. The freedom not to be obstructed in a lawful life, and he wanted all his freedoms not to be obstructed in a lawful life. But then I slowly saw that not only was I not free, but my brothers and sisters were not free. But gradually, Mr. Mandela came to realize that not only he was not free, but his brothers and sisters means the people of his country, the black people of his country, the colored people of his country were also not free. I saw that it was not just my freedom that was curtailed. Curtailed means reduced. He saw that not only his freedom was curtailed or reduced, but the freedom of everyone who looked like I did. That means whoever who was black-skinned people, whoever who was colored people, every that person's freedom was curtailed. Every that person's freedom was reduced by the white-skinned people of South Africa who were governing South Africa at that time. That is when I joined the African National Congress. And that is when the hunger for my own freedom became the greater hunger for the freedom of my people. So when Mr. Mandela realized that not only his freedom was curtailed or reduced, but the freedom of all those people who were blacks, who were black-skinned people, who were colored people of South Africa, the freedom of all those people were curtailed, reduced, were taken away from them. And that's why he wanted to free his country. That's why he wanted to liberate these black-skinned people of South Africa. And that's why he joined African National Congress Party. And that is when the hunger for my own freedom, because first of all he wanted freedom only for himself. When he was a student, when he was a young man, he wanted freedom just for himself, only the transitory, only the temporary freedoms. But now he became aware that not only his freedom, but the freedom of all his brothers and sisters, all the black people freedoms were curtailed. And that's why he freedom for all those black people. So this is the photograph of the first black president of the first non-racial democratic government of South Africa, Mr. Nelson Mandela. It was this desire for the freedom of my people to live their lives with dignity and self-respect that animated my life, that transformed a frightened young man into a bold one, that drove a law-abiding attorney to become a criminal, that turned a family-loving husband into a man without a home, that forced a life-loving man to live like a monk. So it was this desire for the freedom of his people to live their lives with dignity. He wanted dignity for the black people. He wanted black people of South Africa to live their life with dignity and self-respect. And that's why he wanted freedom of these people. And that animated his life, that changed Mr. Mandela's life, that transformed Mr. Mandela's life. It changed the frightened young man into a bold one. That desire transformed Mr. Mandela's life, that transformed Mr. Mandela from frightened young man into a bold one. Now he became a bold. He had no fear. Now that drove a law-abiding attorney, a lawyer. Mr. Mandela was a attorney, a lawyer, but because to desire to liberate his country, to desire to liberate his people, he became a criminal. That turned a family-loving husband into a man without a home. He was a family-loving man, a family-loving husband who wanted to live with his family, but now he was living without a home. He was roaming here and there to liberate his people. That forced a life-loving man to live like a monk. He loved his life, but now he was living his life like a monk. I am no more virtuous or self-sacrificing man than the next man, but I found that I could not even enjoy the poor and limited freedoms I was allowed when I knew my people were not free. Mandela says that even could not able to enjoy even the limited freedoms that were given to him as the attorney. He wanted the complete freedom for his people, for the black people of South Africa. He wanted the complete freedom for his country. Freedom is indivisible. The chains on any one of my people were the chains on all of them. The chains on all of my people were the chains on me. When Mandela says that freedom is indivisible, you can't divide freedom, that some people are free to do something and the others have and others don't have that freedom. He says that freedom is indivisible. Freedom is equal for everybody. So he says that the chains on any one of my people were the chains on all of them. He wants total and equal freedom for everybody. I knew that the oppressor must be liberated just as surely as the oppressed. That means the person who are oppressed, not only those people should be liberated, but that person who is oppressing, who is taking away the liberty of other people, that person also should be liberated. Why he says so? He says a man who takes away another man's freedom is a prisoner of hatred. He is locked behind the bars of prejudice and narrow-mindedness. Mandela says that the oppressor is also prisoner. The people who take away another man's freedom, that person is also not free. He is the prisoner of hatred and he is locked behind the bars of prejudice. That person is locked behind the bars of the prison of prejudice and narrow-mindedness. He is suffering from narrow-mindedness. So a person who is suffering from hatred, a person who is suffering from narrow-mindedness, a person who is suffering from prejudice, that person is not a free in true sense. And Mandela says that that person should also be liberated. I am not truly free if I am taking away someone else's freedom, just as surely as I am not free when my freedom is taken from me. And Mandela says that he is not truly free if he is taking away freedom of some other people. Similarly, if some other people is taking away Mr. Mandela's freedom, then that person is also not free who is taking away his freedom. That means the oppressor and the oppressed both are prisoners. The oppressed and the oppressor alike are robbed of their humanity. And Mandela says that the oppressed as well as the oppressor both are robbed of their humanity. The humanity have been stolen, have been robbed from the oppressed as well as the oppressor. So this is the conclusion of the second part of the chapter. Thanks for watching the video.